So I've been taking an improv theater class, and if you happen to have known me back in my old life, you'll know what a feat of a miracle this actually is to be seen on stage and doing improv nonetheless. Somebody that likes to plan what they want to say and to make sure that it's the right thing at the right time for the right person, and improv just throws that out the window. I have learned a lot through this class, but one of the underlying principles that I want to share with you, because it might help you, is the principle of yes and. And this is the foundation of improv theater, apparently. And it goes like this. Whenever you are working with a partner, you're working in tandem and you don't know what they're going to say, and likewise. And so, if you both follow the principle of yes and, what happens is that you can have this implicit agreement to progress a scene. Because when you don't do this, what ends up happening is that the scene shuts down and it goes nowhere. So imagine there's a character, a man, talking to a woman, and they happen to be married. And there's no scripts, there's no prompts. You get on stage and you're in an argument with one of the characters. They're arguing about, it doesn't really matter. Insert your favorite argument. And when you're in resistance, all it does is reduce down to bickering. And so literally, the scene will just be going back and forth. I told you so. Why did you do this? Da 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 da, with negativity, because that's what resistance is. But if you follow the yes and principle, even if it's an argument, it can actually go in a lot of different directions. I want a divorce. Well, me too. I do. You are just a piece of work, aren't you? I know what you've really been doing. And then it goes to the next person, following the yes and. What? How do you know what I've been doing? Did you hire a private investigator? Now all of a sudden, the audience has a mystery to latch onto, but the people who are actually acting it out are also steeped in the mystery. Versus, if you're not following the yes and, this applies for manifestations. I'm going to get there in a moment though. You have character that says, I want a divorce. No, you can't divorce me. Crickets. We've been married for 30 years. No. Where does it go? I want a divorce. I said I want a divorce. Why do you always do this? Oh, you can't divorce. You see how it goes in circles, right? And so when we are in resistance with our manifestations, this is what I found, it's directly applicable to our lives. We close the doors. We actually close down opportunities. And I think back to this person that I met in the park who there was a soul contract. If you've been following me, it's a couple episodes back. And I went to them wanting to get to know them. And what I found is that there was no yes and. I asked about their social media. I asked about playing music. I asked literally everything that I could think of that would be conversation starters to bridge a getting to know you friendship beyond just the park setting. And everything was a closed door. There was no portal to anything. But indeed, we would actually engage in exploring a friendship within the confines of something different because I released control. I was like, okay, well, maybe it doesn't have to go like this. So it went a different way. And then I found out that it's not a friendship that I feel called to explore. So when we are following the yes and principle, when you are out in your day to day life, what you'll notice is that when you start using yes and, it actually goes in very surprising directions. And it opens up portals to reality that you might not see. And here's the thing about resistance that I've learned. When you are wanting to control the outcome or the timing or the why or things of that nature, you're very often in resistance without even knowing that you're in resistance. And so surrendering to a principle or even a practice like yes and actually pulls you out of that resistance, because you can literally create a practice for yourself to say, I want to have 5 yes ands when somebody approaches me or at work or with clients. So imagine that you're walking down the street with your dog, if you have a dog. And normally you're kind of like lost in your thoughts and you're in your own world. Imagine being a yes and person just for one day. Somebody says hi to you, they're walking a dog, your paths cross. Normally, based on how you're operating in the world, you might just be like yeah, kind of nod and let them walk by. But a yes and, you're like, hi, yeah, how are you doing today? Really, how are you doing? I've seen you before, and it looks like our paths are crossing. Do you have any interesting tidbit that you would like to share today? I'm practicing a yes and approach to my life. So I am not only open to a conversation, but I'm engaging in a way that gives you something also. Maybe you don't want to say this part. To walk through. I'm opening a portal of conversation. And when you practice this, it can actually change your life in ways that you don't see coming. So last week at my class, I was on stage and I was endowed with a character that was a neighbor. I was playing a man neighbor who was peeking through the window of the single woman. And it was on an estate in England, is where I had in my mind, although I didn't really have a British accent. But the scene went like this, where I was accused of peeking through the window. And I followed the yes, but I didn't follow the and fully. And then it got to something where I was uncomfortable, where I was accused of sniffing this person's undergarments. And inside my head, I had some resistance to this, taking on this role. And what I found is that I subconsciously started blocking and started shutting down and arguing with a character. And in my mind, I actually was going to admit to doing that and being a cross-dresser, which I eventually did, and actually wearing like her stockings and things of that nature. But at first, the scene actually devolved into, no, that's not me. How could you accuse me of that? Just because I'm looking through your window doesn't have anything to do with your undergarments. And then it volleyed back to me. It was like, yes, you are. I was like, no, I'm not. Da, 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 da. It's probably somebody else. Da, da. And there were 3 times of this, 3 volleys of this, and it wasn't going anywhere, but I was not aware of my resistance or my blocking. So I was coached during the class and said, okay, so now admit to this And then I took the scene to this next level where then I pulled up my trousers and there was a garter belt, her garter belt under there. And it changed the whole dynamic when I followed the yes and, but I had to be coached to get there. And what I realized is how resistance actually creates this barrier in our minds that we don't even know that we're resisting. In my mind, I was going to get there, but I was going to get there in my time, and it was stalling the scene. It was actually not creating a conducive working environment for a portal of creativity to be opened up and entertainment for the audience. And the audience loved the part that it eventually got to, but it stalled in the water before it got there. And had I not received that coaching, I don't think that the scene would have really developed. And this was kind of an aha moment for me that as somebody that really likes to go with the flow, and I consider myself to be a yes person more than a no person, what I observed about myself is that I actually wasn't aware of my own level of resistance. And it's so insidious because when we are fully embedded in our desires and our autonomy and our sovereignty, we're just operating from the position of consciousness that we're navigating through life, choosing and selecting what we want, especially when we're following the law of attraction. I'm not attracted to that character, so I'm going to rebuff it. But what happens is we self-select unknowingly based on our unconscious patterns. We actually self-select for the same, and the same is often built from our preferences that have come from all of our past experiences and our manifestation ideas and our list and things of that nature. And we can actually be blinded by our own impervious resistance, meaning we don't even know the level of resistance that we have until we actually start practicing challenging ourselves, doing things like being a yes and person at least 5 times in a day, and finding where you can apply it. I recently had another example. One of my TikToks, I received a comment from a person who disagreed with my approach, and their tone was really, I found, to be immature, and I considered blocking them, but I decided not to, and I yes and it. And what happened is that somebody else who knew about this other person commented and let me know how much my work was resonating with him. And even though this other person, who was a relatively big creator, was coming in and disagreeing with me and my approach, it actually facilitated a deeper conversation because I was able to ask questions. And I was also able to call them on their shadow because I realized, looking into their credentials, that there were some questions there. And their manner of approach was, to me, kind of like bullying. And given that they were automatically screened from TikTok, I've had a lot of problems with people who have been automatically screened. And even though this was a relatively large creator, when I went and I looked at their work, I could tell that they were in their shadow. So it created an opportunity for me to stand up to their bullying, perhaps in ways that other creators were not able to do so. And one of their followers, who had religiously followed them for a very long time, apparently bought a course and had devastation happen in their life. And I was able to help them with a situation that I felt like made things right for them, helped them to see things a little differently, like why things went wrong. And so I actually felt very good about that yes and, because the net benefit of it was standing up to a bully and helping somebody that had bought this course and felt like their life was ridiculously harder as a result. And I felt like they really needed help. And that original commenter never came back and apologized or tried to help them. They are rather large, so they probably are swimming in comments. And so it felt like they really actually needed assistance. And I was happy to fill that role and to see that just because somebody has a large following and stamps himself as an expert in a particular field doesn't actually mean that they are. And it doesn't mean that they're good at what they do, or that it's effective for everybody, or that it's entirely above board. So when we follow this yes and approach, I think about, had I just blocked them, which was a viable approach based on their tone and the sense that I was getting from them about bullying. I felt as though there was much more to be gained by following the yes and. And it revealed something very significant to multiple people. And it also challenged the person who probably wasn't used to being challenged in that way. When we follow yes and allow for the doors of opportunity to open for us, we allow for manifestations to flow through us in more magical and serendipitous ways. Because when we are trying to control the outcome or the timing or what something looks like, what happens is, and I'm guilty of this as well, we tune our focus to only select for our exact criteria. We might miss the thing that's actually trying to come in, or the person or the opportunity that's trying to come in. Because sometimes the manifestations don't show up exactly the way that we expect them to. In fact, oftentimes they don't. And it's part of the practice of actually creating this fluidity within our attention to see what's standing right next to us or what is wanting to emerge in our reality. And when we follow this principle of yes and, it allows for that to happen a lot more fluidly and easily, because we can easily overlook and ignore what seems like it doesn't fit, or we are focused in a different direction, and we can actually blind ourselves to a much easier manifestation process that is wanting to coexist alongside of us. And also, it reveals to you exactly where your resistance is. Yes, and I challenge you to try it out. And I'd love to hear if you do it. You can email me, sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com, if you want to keep it private. If you want to comment, I'd love to hear how this goes for you.